November 9th, 2020 City Council meeting. Mr. Short, can you lead us in Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'm 6 feet away from everybody, so I'm going to try to talk without the mask. First of all, I want to welcome everybody here tonight that can come out and participate with the City Council in our meeting tonight. I also want to thank everybody that's watching us via YouTube and the City channel. Just so that everyone knows that they can participate in the citizen comment period or any of our part of our meeting tonight when we have what are those things called?
Public hearings.
Public hearings, thank you. So you can participate in public hearings. We've got a phone number that you can call, 844-844-9200. When you are prompted, you're going to enter the code 398145, followed by the pound sign. You will hear question and answer session has started. At that time, you're going to press the star, followed by the number 6. And then you will hear if you would like to speak, press 1. It's a good time to press 1 at that point. While you're listening in, you can hear an audio feed of the meeting. When you're prompted by the moderator, then you can share your comments. Each citizen's allowed 4 minutes of comments, so you'll see the little stoplight here that's in front of the podium come on. When it's green, it's good to go. When it turns yellow, you should start winding down your comments, and when it turns red, please close out and allow the next person to speak. With that, we come to item number 2, which is to adopt the meeting agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstetter. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Any discussion on the meeting agenda? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item number 3 is to consider the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Allen. Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And then that brings us to matters from council. And I've got a couple of things I'd like to present tonight. First, I don't think I've been sitting in this chair since I've been on council that we haven't had one of our, or more than one of our public employees do outstanding work. And in this last 2 weeks, we got a letter from UVA sending their appreciation for our folks in Public Works and our fire marshal for the city. Mr. Shaw, could you explain?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, if it'd be your pleasure, I'll read you the letter. We received this from the UVA Augusta Dialysis Clinic out on West Main Street, and it was addressed to Mr. Hamp. Dear Mr. Hamp, we would like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation to several departments within the city of Waynesboro. On Monday, October 5th, 2020, the city's water division contacted the assistant nurse manager of our dialysis facility in Waynesboro and let her know that there was a water main break in the area of the Summercrest Apartments. Their main concern was that we had enough water to continue providing treatments to our patients. Later that evening, the Emergency Operations Center attempted to contact the facility after the employees of the water division did not get an answer at the door. When the EOC did not receive an answer to their phone call, they dispatched a police officer to the facility to ensure everything was okay and to notify the facility of the water main break, again to ensure that we were able to continue providing treatments to our patients. The clinical team at the facility had been informed by the assistant nurse manager of the issue and had determined the facility was still able to operate. The water division contacted our renal technical manager to provide information on the water main break and to ensure that everyone involved was informed of the repair plan after our patients had completed their treatments. Our renal technical manager arrived at the facility at 2200 hours. Now, Mr. Mayor, what is that in civilian time?
What time was it?
2,200 hours
10 o'clock
at night,
at night.
and was briefed by the on-site water division crew. He spoke with them about what processes we needed to perform to safely secure our equipment. The crew was extremely helpful and offered assistance to make the repair as seamless as possible. The Renal Technical Manager contacted the Waynesboro Fire Department and spoke with Deputy Chief Fitzgerald as he had to turn off the temporary fire pump when the water was secured. Deputy Chief Fitzgerald was very helpful in offering guidance on the requirements in order to remain in compliance with Fire Safety Code, which is a standard our facility is held to. The repair of the water main break, the prior notifications, and the professionalism demonstrated by the City of Waynesboro employees made what could have been a very difficult situation an extremely smooth and seamless operation. Our goal is to provide our patients their treatments in a safe, compassionate, and professional manner. The services provided by the City of Waynesboro is integral in meeting this goal, and the above example demonstrates that your team is truly a partner in this endeavor. And it's signed sincerely by Christopher Clunan, the Renal Technical Services Director, Yvonne Jarvis, the nurse manager, and Heather Coiner, the assistant nurse manager. And the folks that were there with the water department included Scott Hashhagen, and then Eric Morris's crew, and then Michael Helmick, Daniel Workman, Jeremiah Smith, Derek Hayes, and then, of course, again, we mentioned Deputy Chief of the Fire Department, George Fitzgerald.
Thank you, sir. And on behalf of the City Council, we would like to thank our EOC staff, our Police Department, Public Works, and Fire Department. They just about had everybody in the city working for them on a single day, so that's great news. One more thing I would like to share, and I would like to thank Shannon McGuffin and Sharon Fitz. On November the 5th of this year, I was given a tour of the Rise Library on Ohio Street. First time I've been in the facility since they opened. It's a very nice facility. They've done a great job, very tasteful. It's got a lot of history, Black history in there, a lot of books to be checked out. So I invite the community to stop in, show your support, get an understanding of the Rise and that facility. And again, thank you, Shanda. Number 5, matters from council. Does any council member have anything they would like to share?
Yes, Mayor Henderson. I would also like to say I had the opportunity recently to visit the new Rise headquarters, and I was so impressed with all the work and thought that went into creating such a beautiful place. I also encourage others to take a moment and see what all the exciting news is about, and thank you, Shannon and Sharon, for spending probably over an hour with me and giving me a very memorable experience. Oh, I'd also like to mention, as I was driving on Roster today, I noticed the installment of our new stoplight, and that was nice to see the Tiffany and Roster Avenue stoplight.
Thank you.
Put up.
I've got a couple things. First, I wanted to sort of thank personally, but then also the whole city, Lisa Jeffers in the registrar's office and her staff for putting together an amazing job on the recent election. It was a very different election than previous years, and they had been working hard for 6 weeks with the early in-person voting, and everything I've heard, things sort of went very well, and they were able to staff the wards on election day for folks that chose to vote on election day, and just wanted to give her some applause for doing that and leading things through, and hopefully they can get some rest now, because I'm sure it's been a long haul. Second issue is my sort of COVID update. You probably have all seen that we expect that we will cross 10 million cases soon, if we haven't already. In the state of Virginia, we're getting very close to 200,000 cases. And locally, we still continue to have small jumps and bumps. We don't see a particular trend right now in Waynesboro, which is good because a lot of places are trending higher. But as someone who's lost friends to this virus, it's still with us, and we still all need to be vigilant and care for ourselves, care for each other, and continue to do the job of following guidelines and working together to control this so it doesn't control us. So, and my last thing then, My constituent meeting usually is the first Tuesday of the month in the morning. That was election day, so last week I did not have one. I'm trying to find an evening time that works, so tomorrow evening, 7 p.m. I think the weather's going to be good enough to still meet at the Constitution Park Pavilion. And as the weather does not cooperate, I'll try to find somewhere inside that people feel comfortable coming. So I will be out at the Constitution Park Pavilion at 7 p.m. tomorrow with a chair and a lantern if it's dark. And so we'll talk about whatever people want to talk about. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Hosstetter. Any other comments? Nope. Okay. That brings us to item number 6. Item number 6 is to hold a public hearing, consider introducing an ordinance, Code Chapter 98 zoning, to add a new district tentatively designated as a MB or MX-B mixed business district. Mr. Jude.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. At the last council meeting, I presented a little bit of background on this, and I'll repeat some of it for the benefit of anyone who might want to speak at the public hearing. Last year, the Planning Commission began collecting public input through a series of several meetings and discussions at the Planning Commission and at one point a property owner survey on issues along Commerce Avenue and with zoning specifically. We've also discussed public projects, but that's not something that I'm addressing today. Today, I'm just discussing the zoning issue. The main issue being that the current zoning does not really reflect, is somewhat patchwork in that area, and it doesn't really reflect the character of the neighborhood as exists, and is in some cases a barrier to redevelopment and reuse of buildings in that area. The conclusion of that has been the proposal for a new zone to be created in the city zoning ordinance, and then in the future to rezone parcels to bring it into that zone. So to clarify, tonight we are only creating the category. This is only a text amendment. There will be no parcels affected by the ordinance passed tonight. At a following meeting, the Planning Commission will propose an actual rezoning to put parcels into this new category. Again, to recap, that we had 3 public meetings, one focused on city services, policing and property maintenance, one that was focused on soliciting input for public projects, and then we had a public meeting that was with a number of landowners that was focused on land use in the Commerce Avenue corridor. We sent out a property owner survey to properties along the Commerce and Delphine corridor, and we had a series of Planning Commission discussions after that as well. The area that we were mainly focused on, though, since then our focus has expanded, has a broad mix of uses scattered all around. A lot of it was developed prior to strong zoning controls. So the zoning is scattered and inconsistent, which sort of ruins the point of a zone. The point of a zone being that you have a large area where the same rules apply. And so in the end, what you have is just sort of each parcel has its own particular rules attached to it, and that's confusing for folks who want to build something. We have abundant LI zoning, that's light industrial zoning, which is generally not supposed to be near residences, and yet we have light industrial zone parcels on almost every block in this neighborhood, with the rest of the parcels being residential all around them. Sort of defeats the purpose. We also have a lot of other parcels that are zoned LB, local business, which is supposed to be allow for sort of neighborhood-oriented retail, and yet there really isn't demand for that type of commercial development in this area. And to the extent that there is demand, we're trying to get it to redevelop East Main Street. And so it's just very difficult for the uses that are envisioned in that zone to often be developed in that area. Here's a map of the current zoning. You can see gray is the LI parcels that are scattered about on each of the residential blocks. The tan is the residential zoning. Pink here is the LB zoning. And again, a lot of that fronts on Commerce Avenue, with the idea being that you would have sort of retail and commercial fronting on Commerce Avenue. But again, Commerce Avenue is no longer the traffic arterial. There's very little traffic on that road. Most of it is on Delphine after the Delphine widening and the extension of 340. And so for that reason, it's just very hard for commercial uses to be viable there. And so we've, in order to try to create more flexibility, we're proposing a new zone. We feel that the current zoning ordinance does not have a category that really fits areas like this. And we actually have several other areas like this, especially on Ohio Street and along 8th Street, where it's sort of formerly city center industrial areas. So they're legacy properties that aren't designed to be redeveloped into sort of suburban commercial properties, but that aren't in areas that have a lot of frontage that they could be viable for retail uses. So we want to create a lot more flexibility for them to be redeveloped into residences, clean kind of production facilities, and still allow all those commercial uses. The new zone that we are proposing is going to be titled the MXB, Mixed Business Zone. This fits our current nomenclature. We have all the business zones are something B, so we have central business, local business, highway business, so this will become MXB. And then MX is what we use in the other zones, like RMX for mixed. It will be meant for use in areas that have underutilized, sort of dilapidated industrial facilities and large commercial buildings that are in close proximity to residences. So we wouldn't want to zone them to one of the industrial zones that would allow a lot of uses that would not be appropriate next to houses, but that are in an established urban subdivision pattern. So there's plenty of shared parking. The buildings are built very close to the street. It's hard for them to provide the kind of site development standards that we require in our ordinance right now. And we're not intending this zone to be used in new subdivisions. This is not something that we would imagine that you would create a new subdivision and zone it to this. The proposed uses for this new zone would attempt to reduce barriers to reuse. So this would become sort of our most wide open zone, reflecting the character of these neighborhoods. You know, I talk about how in every neighborhood in the zoning you have a trade-off between two things. You have on the one hand sort of economic vitality and personal freedom on property, people's ability to do things that make sense and that make money and that they want to do on their property on the one hand, and then on the other hand you have sort of control. You have people's ability to be free from nuisance from neighboring properties. And so that where neighborhoods fall in that spectrum varies, and it's to the city's advantage to offer a lot of different trade-offs for people, because different folks like different things. I often talk about how my sister and I bought a house and we didn't want to buy in a neighborhood where we couldn't have music on late at night and things like that, so we bought in another neighborhood that was a little different. So there's different trade-offs that can happen, and a lot of these areas are areas that are struggling more from restrictions than they are from the lack thereof. So what will be permitted is a wide range of residential commercial uses as well as non-polluting industrial uses. So we've had a number of proposals come to the city that would not be allowed in these areas. One of them you saw was the Vector Industries proposal, where you had its manufacturing would have to be an industrial zone, and yet it's totally clean. There's no difference between that business and, say, the Lumos building. You know, everything's happening inside of a building. And so for that reason, we want to allow that kind of business. We had another proposal on Commerce Avenue that I talk about a lot, where there was a sort of a boutique knife maker, and it was really manufacturing, but it couldn't be allowed there in an LB zone. And you didn't want to rezone it to LI because then you could allow all kinds of other uses that would be really noxious next to homes. So we're trying to create a zone that will allow for a larger range of business reuses while still restricting uses that will be really noxious next to a house. We've also added some new use standards, so you can do industrial activity in this zone, but it can't be, businesses can only operate during the day to try to reduce noise at night, and they have to be non-polluting. They have to be industries that aren't putting out fumes or smells or anything like that. We've also reduced the parking requirement in this zone. Again, parking is a big barrier to redevelopment in these areas. I talked about this before, that parking standards are really designed for suburban areas where everyone is driving to the destination and there is no shared parking available, and so every business has to provide as much parking as they could possibly need at their peak service hours. And so that's what you get in a more suburban area. And if you look at exit 94 from a Google Earth, you'll see that most of it is parking lots. You end up requiring more square footage in parking lot than building. And that's not how these core urban areas were originally built. They were built out to provide more building than road and to accommodate traffic from all different kinds of modes of transportation, people walking there, people parking, people carpooling, and being in the center of the city. And so we'll reduce the parking requirement in this areas. And additionally, you have a lot of older buildings built right up to the sidewalk, and for them to provide any parking spaces, they would have to demolish the building. So that becomes really hard to reuse those buildings. We had a restaurant out there that had to demolish a next door building in order to meet their parking requirement. So the new zone will not eliminate the parking requirement like the central business zone, but it will reduce it. It'll reduce it by 50%, and you will not have to provide any off-street parking if you only need 3 spaces or fewer. And again, this is because we're intending this to be used in areas that have a historic gridded subdivision pattern. That means lots of parallel parking on street, lots of shared parking for them to access. So where do we envision this zone? You'll be receiving a proposal in a few weeks, or probably in January, coming before you to rezone parcels to this zone. It'll be all currently zoned LI and LB parcels in the lower Basic City area, as well as a number of LB and LI parcels along Ohio Street. For current light industrial property owners, they will lose some of their entitlements. Some things that they can currently do under their zoning, such as a crematorium or a polluting industry or a tow lot, things like that, warehousing, well, they will not be allowed to do after this zoning change, but they will gain a lot of new entitlements to commercial uses and to residential uses if they want to redevelop their warehouses into some kind of apartments or something like that. Owners of properties currently zoned LB will not lose any entitlements. In fact, they'll gain some entitlements to be able to do some things like non-polluting industry in their buildings. And like I said, I think this will provide us with an option for redevelopment areas that is currently missing from our zoning code. Staff recommends approval of this zoning text amendment with a few minor changes potentially that I would put to you for discussion. Again, we're kind of having things appear as we put together the map for the actual rezoning, and one of them is that we currently have flea market or auction as a C use, CUP. So if you want to allow that throughout the zone, we could change it to P. We currently have daycare in there as a C, and we've also discussed to try to cut down on the number of CUPs we have to issue with this rezoning, that we could change that to a P as well. So I would probably recommend making those minor tweaks. But again, this is kind of unfolding as we put together the rezoning, and I would love to get feedback from council on any of these changes. That's all that I have. Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Duday? Okay. I hereby open the public hearing into item number 6. And just for those, do we have anybody signed up?
We do not have anyone signed up, sir.
Okay. If you want to call in for this public hearing, the phone number is 844-9200. You'll receive a prompt. You'll enter 398145, followed by the pound sign. When you hear the question and answering has started, hit the star, followed by the number 6. You'll be placed into the room, and you'll press the number 1 key. You'll wait until you hear the moderator say, share your comments with council, and then you can present.
There's no one waiting, Mr. Mayor.
No one waiting? Okay. I hereby close this public hearing. Do we have a motion to introduce this ordinance?
I actually have a point of clarification, if I may. So are we agreeing to these changes that are up on the screen at this time, or is that still something to be sorted out?
Again, I'm looking for a little bit of feedback. A lot of this is sort of developing as the rezoning gets put together. We can bring additional tweaks to the text, or bring a new text amendment. We'd have to tweak it with the rezoning. But where we're at currently, I would lean towards having to issue fewer CUPs with the rezoning. So you would want to make the change if that's the case. If you're concerned about these uses and you're okay with just issuing a bunch of CUPs initially, then leave it as is.
So basically, we're voting on the category and text amendment that you presented tonight.
Right. Anticipating that rezoning and how many sort of additional riders we're going to have to put on it to accommodate everyone who's currently there.
Okay.
So for the flea market or auction, so the motion for this evening is not only engrossing the proposed text amendment, but also converting flea market or auctions from conditional to permitted uses and daycare from conditional to permitted uses.
That's my opinion. I would say to change that to P in the text amendment. If you want to leave it as is, that's fine. We can just issue a CUP for the currently existing flea market there when we bring the rezoning. just trying to cut down on those when we bring the rezoning. Should clean this up a little bit.
Well, I would offer only because because council's not had an opportunity to review the parcels as we sort of talked in the work session, that to engross the proposed text amendment this evening, or table the motion until the next meeting until we've also reviewed, because the second bullet, I think to Dr. Hostler's point, is really connecting the parcel recommendations rather than do we want to create a new zone.
You could also introduce the motion and not vote on it next time, if you're not quite ready to do so, if that's, I think that's okay. Right?
If we introduce the ordinance this evening, you would be introducing in substantial form that is in the packet, not with Mr. Juday's sort of
okay.
recommended. These aren't in the ordinance that is before council. These are guidance that staff is looking for council for some direction on these sort of outstanding or these side issues. But what's before council this evening is just the ordinance in the packet. But
Ms. Michelson, if we do have alterations as we work out the rezoning, if we have alterations we need to make to the zoning text, will we have to advertise a new public hearing for that?
No, as long as they're substantially similar to what we have, and anybody that could come and spoken on any of these issues could have come today. So there's no need, unless we substantially deviate
Okay.
from, like a whole new section of where we propose this MXB to be or something like, that would affect new people or something, we wouldn't have to re-advertise or, so we can make changes or per council, driving around and seeing. So I don't know that it's necessary to table because there still could be some nuanced changes to the ordinance after the public hearing.
So it might make some sense to table. Yeah.
So
Just if council needs more time, not necessarily for revision purposes.
Well, to zero in on my question, that is the flea market or auction site, is that I think I would be more inclined to support it under a conditional use permit.
Okay.
Only because if we engross it as a permitted use, every parcel that turns light blue on that map can have a flea market.
Yeah, CUPs are always sort of safer in the sense that you can control each thing. They just create more administrative barriers and
But I think in the context of just how existing uses can adapt, one simple issuance of a CUP for the existing flea auction site would be cleaner and something that I think this council and other future councils could then adapt and change down the road.
well, it probably, and Ms. Michaels is right, I should have just said, just keep the ordinance as it is now. I recommend passing it, and when we bring the rezoning to you, we can discuss whether any of these things should be tweaked.
So the use table is not for consideration this evening?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, Mr. Mayor, I'll make that
My mistake.
motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Short.
To approve the proposed text amendment, and with the understanding that we'll have another stab at the use table.
Okay.
Well, to be clear, the use table is part of the ordinance, correct?
Right, this is these specific changes.
Right.
So the use table is part of the ordinance.
That's
Right, I think we're
correct.
saying, well, if we have to reconsider the use table, we'll do so when we bring the rezoning later, and we'll have to do another text amendment then.
I think I defer to Ms. Michelson, but I'm understanding her to say if there's not a substantial overhaul, that you might be able to tinker, but the use table is part of the zoning ordinance text. And so if you would introduce it as it is proposed in your packet, then it would include the flea market as a conditional use and daycare as a conditional use.
Okay. Or, Mr. Mayor, I'll amend my motion and to recommend approval and include in the use table daycare as a permitted use and flea markets or auction sites as a conditional use.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second for Mr. Short's motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter.
Yep.
There's no voting on this tonight. We'll carry this over to the November 23rd meeting.
And is it possible for them to table it at that meeting if they would like to reconsider with the rezoning later?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, item number 7, to hold a public hearing considering introducing ordinance, City Code 98, zoning section 5.6, signs, and 9.3, enforcement procedures and remedies. Mr. Jude.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. We have before you today the sign ordinance from the zoning ordinance. The city's legal counsel determined that portions of this chapter were unconstitutional and therefore were not enforceable. And so for that reason, we brought a wholesale revision of the chapter to you. This is because of a Supreme Court case that took place in 2015, Reed versus Town of Gilbert, where the court concluded that content restrictions in sign ordinances were unconstitutional, that they were a First Amendment violation. So the town, I believe in that particular case, the town allowed, for instance, a political sign to be placed in a median, but it didn't allow for temporary directional signs, and a church put a temporary directional sign to service there, and they cited them for that. And the Supreme Court ruled that no, that if you allow any kind of sign that says something, it has to be allowed to say anything. And so our sign ordinance classifies signs based on what's on the sign, the content of the sign. And so that is something that we cannot do. For that reason, we're proposing an amendment that would eliminate those content distinctions and reclassify signs by things that are not content-based, just simply their physical characteristics and where they can be located. So some examples of these changes: identification signs, promotional signs, political signs, and yard sale signs are all categories in our current ordinance, and all those are based on what's on the sign. So we'll eliminate all those categories, and they'll all be regulated under minor signs, or things like that. Another example, we have construction signs, and right now that's defined as signs that mention architects, engineers, construction regulations, etc. Again, that refers to the content. So now we've changed that to signs on properties that have an existing building permit. So they're regulated in that way. We have regulations for American flags. Now that's being changed to simply apply to all flags. So, in addition to recommending the approval of this amendment to come into compliance with case law, the Planning Commission also recommends extending the time limit for temporary signs. These are cloth signs or sort of disposable signs that are put up by businesses to advertise something for a brief period of time. They're currently allowed to draw permits for 2 of these signs for 2 30-day periods within a 12-month period. Planning Commission proposes allowing them for 2 60-day periods within a 12-month period. This should allow our businesses some more flexibility as they advertise reopening coming out of COVID. Staff recommends approval of the attached text amendment. Any questions?
Any questions on the staff report? No? Good job, Mr. Jude. I hereby open the public hearing. And once again, I'll repeat this phone number, 844-844-9200. When you are prompted, enter 398145, followed by the pound sign. You'll hear Q&A has started, press *6. You will hear, if you would like to speak, press 1, and then you'll listen to an audio feed and be prompted by the moderator when to start. Do we have any citizens signed up for this?
No, sir.
Anybody on the phone?
No, sir.
I hereby close the public hearing. Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance for the text amendment for the signs?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. And is there any discussion on this ordinance? Okay. This ordinance will be carried over to our November 23rd business meeting. Item number 8 brings us to yet another public hearing. This public hearing is to receive comments on various budget ordinances, which are aggregated increases and amend the fiscal year 2021 budget by $2,338,225. Mr. McCormick.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Item number 8 on council's agenda this evening is to hold a public hearing which will cover the appropriation ordinances in items 9 and 10. The ordinance has been broken up into 2 groups. Ordinance that can be introduced and discussed this evening are in item 9, and ordinance that can be introduced, discussed, and voted on this evening are in item 10. Item 9A contains the encumbrance roll forward from fiscal year 2021. These are expenditures that were encumbered during fiscal year 2020 but not spent by the close of the fiscal year. These items are provided for by revenue generated in excess of expenditure in fiscal year 2020, even after taking into account COVID-19 related revenue reductions. Item number 9B is a school ordinance to appropriate funds remaining from a grant received during the prior year out of the school's fund balance and into their operating budget in their multi-year fund so that they can fulfill the stipulations of the grant. Item 9C is an appropriation of sales and meals tax revenues received for the first quarter that are in excess of the 2021 operating budget. All the items under number 10 are for grants received by the schools from external sources. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to field them at this time.
Any questions for staff? I hereby open the public hearing. And while we're waiting on that, we'll give out the phone number again, 844-844-9200. When asked to enter an access code, the number is 398145, followed by the hashtag. You'll hear question and answer has started. Hit *6. If you would like to speak, you'll hit the number 1. You'll be placed into the room and you'll hear an audio feed of the meeting, and you'll be prompted to speak when the moderator says to speak.
No one signed up, sir.
No one signed up. Anyone online, Mr. McCormick?
No, sir.
I hereby close the public hearing. We'll now work through each one of these various ordinances, starting with item number 9, is to introduce an ordinance appropriating $245,996 for incumbents in various funds from fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021. Mr. McCormick. Those are the school funds, right, that we're bringing in?
I believe that was the,
That's the
Just-
encumbrance rollover.
yes, sir.
Okay. All right, do we have any questions for Mr. McCormick? No. Do we have a motion to introduce this ordinance?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Okay, this meeting will carry over to our November 23rd meeting. Item 9B is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $51,273 in unassigned fund balance multi-year fund to the school fund for stipends, purchase services, materials, and travel. Anything extra on that, Mr. McCormick?
No, sir.
Okay. Any questions from council for Mr. McCormick or staff? Do we have a motion to introduce this ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. Any discussion? This ordinance will carry over to our November 23rd meeting. Item 9C is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating sales tax and meals tax revenue in the amount of $300,000 for operational expenses. Mr. McCormick?
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any questions for council, from council to staff? Is there a motion to introduce this ordinance?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. This motion will also carry over to our November 23rd meeting. And then item number 10 is to consider introducing and adopting an ordinance appropriating a planning grant for extending year-round school programs in the amount of $600,000 to the school fund for stipends, consultants, materials, and supplies. Mr. Hamp.
Unless there are questions.
This is appropriating money, pass-through money, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Any questions for Mr. Hamp? Do we have a motion to adopt this ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you, Terry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. Is there any discussion on this matter? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 10B is to consider introducing and adopting an ordinance appropriating carry forward Virginia Tiered System of Support, VTSS, BPIS state grant funds in the amount of $419,958 to the school fund to be used for salaries, purchase services, and supplies. More pass-through?
All of these are either grant or pass-throughs.
Okay.
What was that amount? Because I've got a different amount.
$419,958.
Believe that should be 19,958, Mr. Mayor.
400, say that again?
On my agenda,
19,009.
it's 19,958.
Oh. My cheat sheet says 400, so 19,000, I'll change that, 19,958. All right, do we have a motion to adopt $19,958?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, item number 10C is to consider introducing and adopting an ordinance appropriating Title I school improvement grant funds in the amount of $19,574 to the school fund to be used for teacher salaries at Winona Elementary School. Pass-through money, Mr. Hamp?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any questions for staff? Is there a motion to adopt?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, item 10D is to consider introducing and adopting an ordinance appropriating Perkins V-CTE grant funds in the amount of $11,424 to the school fund to be used for technology support at Waynesboro High School and Kate Collins Middle School. These are also pass-through funds. Are there any questions for staff? Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Hofstadter. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 10E is to consider introducing and adopting an ordinance appropriating Augusta Health Community Fund grant funds in the amount of $90,000 to the school fund to be used to purchase food trailers. This is also pass-through money. Any questions for staff? Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved. I'll make a motion.
Mr. Short, a second.
Second.
Mr. Allen? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And item number,
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Part of the Augusta Health one, would, to pleasure of council, I would just offer that it might be suitable to extend a letter of gratitude to Augusta Health's Community Foundation for their assistance with that trip.
we can do that. Thank you, sir. All right, item number 11 is to consider adopting a resolution supporting the nomination of a segment of the South River, South Oak Lane to Hopeman Parkway for designation under the Department of Conservation and Recreation Scenic River Program. Mr. Hamp.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of council, the designation of this portion of the South River has been informed and pursued by our Parks and Recreation staff. You might recall that in April of 2019, at our regular business meeting, the council passed a resolution supporting the nomination of a 6.5-mile segment of the South River beginning approximately at South Oak Lane and terminating at Hopeman Parkway for designation under the Department of Conservation and Recreation's Virginia Scenic Rivers Program. The objectives of the program are to identify, designate, and protect rivers and streams which possess outstanding scenic, recreational, historic, and natural characteristics of statewide significance. So inclusion in the program is significant. The program's focus is on recognition and conservation of the stream and its corridor, and I think it's important to note that designation does not impose strict limitations on the river or remove authority from the locality. The Department of Conservation and Recreation qualifies streams for this designation through a rigorous field evaluation involving 14 distinct criteria. The evaluation of the nominated Waynesboro segment of the South River was completed in August of 2020 by DCR staff with the assistance from Parks and Recreation staff and citizen river advocates Dave Hennell and Phil Kreider. In September of 2020, DCR notified the city of the successful nomination. The next steps in the designation process include the council considering and hopefully adopting the resolution of support for extending the designation to the South River, and then DCR prepares a report regarding the recommended designation. The Board of the Conservation and Recreation considers the nomination, and finally, the General Assembly adopts legislation codifying the designation, and our delegate has agreed to patron such a bill. Staff's recommendation that the council adopt the resolution and we move forward with the designation of our segment of the South River.
Thank you, Mr. Hamp. Are there any questions for Mr. Hamp? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Mr. Allen? Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Short? Thank you both. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would just extend gratitude to Mr. Jones and his staff for shepherding this, I think, important designation for the city and its recreation future. So thank you very much, Dwayne.
Thank you for all your hard work, sir. All right. We've got a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you all. All right. Item number 12, communications correspondence and calendar. Mr. Hamp.
I don't have anything this evening, sir.
Nothing. Okay. That brings us to item number 13, citizen comment period. Do we have anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, sir, we do. Mr. Nicholas Salzman.
Thank you, Mr. Salzman.
Thank you.
You spoke here before. You know the rules. You got 4 minutes, and stoplights right there in front of you.
Absolutely.
Okay, sir.
So I'm Nick Salzman of 909 Gardner Street. I addressed this council last month regarding the state of economic affairs in the city of Waynesboro. The magnitude of the subject matter warranted further analysis, though, to offer potential sources of where the issues may lie. What is clear tonight is that Waynesboro, as a city, is our product to market, and we need to do a better job in preparing that product to market. Think of selling your home. If you were to take an unbiased, objective look at that product, what would you do to get it ready for the marketplace? Would you paint a room, mow the grass, plant some shrubs, maybe fix that leaky faucet? One of the greatest opportunities of leaky faucets we have is what is known as brain drain. Now, I'm kind of a nerd about research. You can't just go off Google or Facebook. You have to really get that peer-reviewed scholarly articles to make it work. And what I found out is that evidenced in our own 2018 comprehensive plan, we are not just lagging behind our peers in the metric of percentage change of population 25 years and older with a bachelor's degree, we're actually declining. As Charlottesville, Stanton, and the region as a whole have had a steady growth in this category, some as much as 10% growth from the 2000 to 2015 period, Waynesboro has actually declined from 20% to just below that in the same period. In a peer-reviewed article from the Chronicle of Higher Education entitled "The Rural Brain Drain," The authors Carr and Kafalis stated, "The most dramatic evidence of the rural meltdown has been the hollowing out. That is, losing the talented young people at precisely the same time that changes in farming and industry have transformed the landscape for those who stay. This so-called rural brain drain isn't a new phenomenon, but by the 21st century, the shortage of young people has reached a tipping point, and its consequences are more severe now than ever before. Simply put, towns are mere years away from extinction, while others limp along in a weakened and disabled state. It is undisputed and widely researched that in the U.S. as well as globally, the single most effective growth strategy for an economy is an educated populace. But how can we as Waynesboro combat this issue and improve our economy? This reminds me of a relatable story of a new employee starting a job and noticing that there was an orange cord in the middle of the floor. When questioned why it existed, he was told by the senior employees, pay no attention to it, focus on your work, it's always been there, that's the way it is. The dutiful employee followed the commands and set about his work until last week. He tripped on that cord and cut off the power to everyone's computer in the office. I challenge you to take a helicopter view of our product, Waynesboro, this week. Don't rationalize any shortcoming away, as our economy has a fight for its life and is already behind. Walk the few blocks of our downtown corridor. Find a shortcoming. Take a look at it with a fresh perspective. No matter why it is in that current state, how can I fix this one item? In order to retain and attract an educated populace to grow our economy, we are in a constant battle of ensuring our house is in order to sell. Just like with your home, these fixes aren't expensive or time-consuming, yet they are necessary to demand what we deserve for the community. A potential or existing resident doesn't care why there are barrels and cones surrounding an unused fountain, but the impact is lasting no matter the reason. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Chanda McGuffin.
Good evening, Council. I wanted to say thank you to the Vice Mayor, Lena, and to the Mayor, Bobby Henderson, for coming and doing their personal private tours at the RISE headquarters. I wanted to say it because it was personable, it was impromptu, it wasn't planned, but I think we spent an hour with both of them, and we need to do that more. And I really hope that you all will come and tour the facility. We are having a tour this Saturday from 9 to 11. We're going to be touring, opening it up. We have a couple people from Charlottesville who wanted to come over. So we can't do our one-to-one with you as people are in there. So if you want a private tour, you can reach out and we will be glad to do that. And then sit at the white table, as Lena calls it, and have a conversation. I do want to say this, though. Lena, thank you, because she has been talking to us. My phone hasn't stopped ringing since we met with her. I think everybody is calling us all across Virginia. She even got Congressman Ben Klein to come and tour, so he should be there sometime this week to tour facility. I would have never got that done. So I thank you for doing that, because it's important. It's very important that it's one of its kind in the state, but it's important that we start acknowledging Black history, and our children need that. We are still doing the tutoring sessions on Wednesday evening. It is going so well. The kids are loving it. They call it night school. And they come in, they know to clean. Thank you to the city for giving us the cleaning supplies. We clean, they know to clean, they know to do their hands. It's remarkable. They know to clean their space where they are. They know their books can't go back on the shelf. They just have it so together. It's a time that you just pour into them over that period of time, and we can see the difference in our little space. We're targeting to actually outgrow the space because we have grown so fast. And Delegate Avoli has already put us on the governor's ear, so we should be getting a mass of books coming in that will take over the space. So we no longer will have a little small event space. So we're going to need to find one. So I just thank you both for coming. Dr. Hofstetter, the others, you all are more than welcome to come Saturday. But if you want a private tour, we'll do that too. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. McGuffin.
No one else, sir.
Okay. That brings us to the very end of our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Allen, do we have a second?
Second.
That was Mr. Short. Mr. Short, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion also carries 5-0.